I'd like to introduce Sue with an unpronounceable surname, uh, who's going to talk to us about financial health, living with Parkinson's through the cost of living crisis. And she says she's very willing to take questions. Anything she can't answer, she will make sure she gets an answer for you afterwards. So we'll take notes on those sorts of things. But she said she's very happy to answer questions on any of the things she's got on the slides, which actually is quite incredible because I've looked at the slides already and there's such a lot on there. So there'll be a lot of possible questions for you to ask. Sue, can I hand over to you now and perhaps you'd introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do and answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane. Martha, could we move to the next slide? There we are. There we go. There's the answer to all those questions, apart from the pronunciation of my second name, which I shall demonstrate now. I am Sue Christoforou, and I'm the Parkinson's UK Senior Policy and Campaigns Advisor on financial health, which in practice means employment, welfare benefits, and somewhat curiously, transport. And I've been at the charity since March of last year, but I have been talking about these kind of things for quite a number of years, albeit from different perspectives and in relation to different conditions. As you can see, I've previously worked for Mind and Macmillan and Citizens Advice, and as I say, covering not dissimilar ground to what I'm going to be talking about today. Martha, if you would. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. Some of this will be familiar to some of you. Some of it might be news, but I've put everything in that I could think of that relates to maximizing income when living with Parkinson's in the context of the cost of living crisis. So apologies in advance for any bits that to some at least will seem blindingly obvious, but for the sake of comprehensiveness, I thought I'd put everything in there just to avoid missing anything, if you see what I mean. Martha, please, if you would. So, as some here will know, as far as benefits go, there are broadly speaking, two working age benefits, i.e. benefits you can get between the ages of 16 and whatever the current state pension age is. The first of those is a means tested benefit. Up until recently, the main means tested benefit that a person with disability could get was employment and support allowance, but that is gradually being replaced by universal credit. And in both instances, then the amount that you will receive, as the phrase means tested suggests, will be determined by other sources of income you may have. So you may be working part-time, and that would affect how much ESA or universal credit you might get. But there's also, for working age people, non-means tested benefits that are specifically designed to support people with the extra costs of living with a disability. And again, we're kind of in transition. There are some people here may still be in receipt of what's called Disability Living Allowance, or DLA, and that is the precursor to Personal Independence Allowance, or PIP. And again, DLA is not available to apply to now. People who have DLA will keep claiming it until their circumstances change and they're no longer eligible. But anybody who wants to claim a disability benefit to help with the costs of living with a disability now will be applying for PIP and not DLA. So those are the two working age benefits. Martha? Seamless. And then non-working age benefits. So that's state pension age and above. And obviously there's state pension, which some may not be aware you have to actually apply for. Some may feel either that it is or it ought to be automatic, but it isn't. You do need to apply for state pension when you get to state pension age. There is also a means tested top-up to state pension, and that's pension credit. And as it says there, it will boost your weekly income to £182.60 if you're single, or £278.70 if you're in a couple. And there's a common misconception that people who either have their own home or have savings or have a work or private pension in addition to their state pension automatically would be eligible for pension credit, but that isn't so. Even if you have any one of those things, your own home, another pension, savings in the bank, even if you have any of those, you may still be able to get pension credit. And it's always worth investigating. In fact, just this summer, government was asking Parkinson's UK and many other organisations to contact the people that we work with to say pension credit is something that you might be eligible for. Do try and claim. And at that time in the summer, DWP were telling us that there was £1.7 billion of pension credit not being claimed, just sitting in the government coffers waiting to be claimed. And you may find that you claim pension credit and the calculations suggest that you might only get 10 pence a week. However, what you do need to be aware of is that pension credit can passport you onto other sources of government funding or government benefits. So even if you run through a benefit calculator and you find that you're going to get pension credit, but it's going to be 10 pence or 50 pence or £1 a week, and you may think it's not worth the bother. It very much is worth the bother, because that 10 pence, 50 pence, £1 a week opens the door to other sources of funding that would be available to you. So please do investigate that. And then the other main benefit for people of state pension age and over is attendance allowance. Attendance allowance, the function of it, the purpose of it is to do the same as disability living allowance or PIP, which I mentioned earlier, essentially to provide some money towards the costs of living with a disability once you're state pension age or over. There is a difference in that you won't receive anything under the attendance allowance scheme specifically for help with mobility, but you will receive funding if you meet the criteria to help with the costs of daily living. Martha, next one, if you would. And there are other benefits. So there's carer's allowance. And again, there's a common misconception that if you receive state pension that you cannot get carer's allowance. You can get carer's allowance. However, it is means tested. So you might find in practice, you don't get any additional income under the carer's allowance banner, if you like. But it is possible to apply even if you're receiving a state pension. Martha, please. So you will no doubt have heard that the government in the spring of last year, in response to the cost of living crisis, came up with a series of payments that it did make to various people. So for those who were on means tested benefits, that's employment and support allowance and universal credit for those of working age, and pension credit for those of state pension age and over, people who qualified by being in receipt of those benefits would have got £650. And all of those payments, it was paid in instalments, 2 instalments, and everybody eligible should have got both instalments by November. And if you are eligible or were eligible and you haven't had that, please get in touch with us and we can help you out with getting the both instalments. And then people on disability benefits, DLA, personal independence payment, or attendance allowance, they got an extra £150. And again, that should have been paid by the end of November of last year. If you haven't received it, get in touch with us and we can chase that for you. And then pensioner households got an additional £300, which should have been paid by the end of last month. And once more, if you're eligible for that payment and you haven't received it, I should say, let us know and we can chase that for you. Martha, can we move on? Thank you very much. And then, well, before I talk about this slide, I should mention that in spring, it was also announced that everybody in the UK would be getting £400 contribution towards their fuel bills, regardless of circumstance, whether or not you have a disability, whether or not you're of pension age, whether or not you were getting means tested benefits. Everybody got that £400. This time round, come April, there will be no equivalent universal payment like the £400 for everybody. There would just be these 3 payments that are on the screen as I speak. So again, for people who are getting means tested benefits, ESA, universal credit, pension credit, there will be 3 instalments paid this time round, totaling £900. And the first of those instalments will arrive in spring. I will be more specific, but government have not been more specific. So it's not quite clear what spring means in practice, when the cash will arrive in bank accounts. And as soon as we know more, then we will let people know. And then the second instalment will be paid in the autumn, and the final one in the spring of next year. And for those with disability who are receiving disability benefits, DLA, PIP, attendance allowance, again, it's £150, and that will be paid in the summer. Again, I have no more specificity about when exactly that will be in the summer, and as soon as I do have that, I'll relay it. And for pensioners, again, there's going to be £300, and that will be paid in the winter of well, this coming winter, not the one we're in, but 23-24. Martha? And there were or are other options to try and maximise income. I mentioned the £400 that everybody received. The instalments were, as it says there, 6 monthly, and that began in October. If you have not received those, and they should go into your fuel account rather than your bank account. So if whoever your electricity provider is, they should have discounted your monthly bill by £66 or £67 every month since October. If that's not happening, let us know and we can chase that for you. And then I think this was in the autumn of last year, the energy price guarantee was announced. And that meant that the unit price for fuel was fixed such that the average household, however that's defined, if they pay by direct debit, should not expect to have a bill of more than £2,500 for the year. But there are those 2 provisos: an average household, and the bill has to be paid by direct debit. And then there was the demand flexibility service, which is in effect now, and that applies only to some energy providers who are offering discounts to people who use electricity off peak. So if you want to find out more about that, then contact your fuel provider and say, are you operating the demand flexibility service? How can I get a discount? What is off-peak? When should I be using my electricity to get that £100? Martha? Oh, excellent. There's the winter fuel payment. The amounts are there, and it's dependent on age. And I think that, well, I know that was paid in autumn of last year. And to those who are eligible will be paid again in the autumn of this year. For a period, cold weather payments were paid, and they are paid where the average temperature is, those temperatures there, 0 centigrade or 32 Fahrenheit, or lower, over 7 days, 7 consecutive days between those dates. And as I say, some payments have already been made, and the weather forecasts suggest that we might be in a position where we're cold enough again for additional cold weather payments to be made. And then there's the warm home discount, as it says there, £140 off an electricity bill where a person gets that element of the pension credit or another means tested benefit, and your fuel provider is part of the scheme. That's not across the board. It depends whether your provider has engaged with that scheme. Thank you, Martha. You're like a mind reader. So I just want to put this slide in because there has been a couple of times since the beginning of the autumn speculation about whether or not there are going to be planned power cuts. And in the autumn, I spoke to one of the network operators, the energy network operators, and asked them what's the likelihood of these power cuts happening and what they're going to look like if they do happen. And what they said to me is that there may be planned power cuts, but the chance of that is quite low, very low, in fact. When I asked the person who was in the meeting with me what kind of percentage figure they would put on it, they said, well, they can't really give a percentage, but approximately 5%. There's approximate 5% chance of there actually being these planned power cuts. And if they happen, it's most probably this month or next. And they will be for no longer than 3 hours at a time. And they'll be spread across the country. So it won't be the case that the whole of Cornwall or the whole of Yorkshire will all have a power cut simultaneously. There'll be little pockets of Yorkshire and little pockets of Wiltshire and of Lancashire. I'm running out of counties now. And so the cuts, if they happen, will be spread across the country. And people will get at least 24 hours notice. What you could do, if you've not done this already, is contact your energy network provider. And when Jane forwards these slides, you'll be able to click on that link there. Each energy network provider has a priority services register, and you can find out what that is and get yourself on that register. There's it's not remotely onerous. All you need to do is, as I say, contact the energy network provider and say, I want to be on the register, and they'll put you on the register. And it means that at no cost, then you have, as it says there, a number you can call anytime to find out about what's happening with power supply. You will have alerts sent to you, so you'll have more notice so you can take action. People who are on the priority services register, if there is a need, there may well be provision made, such as home visits and hot meals provided, etc. And possibly even free hotel accommodation overnight if there's a need. And there may well be welfare teams if needed. Hopefully none of this will come to fruition because there will be no cuts, but it's worth getting yourself on the priority services register just in case. Other ways to maximize your income. Again, some of these you'll be already aware of, I know, but nevertheless, I wanted to add everything in for the sake of comprehensiveness. So there's council tax reduction, which is administered by your local authorities. It is means tested, but it could mean a reduction of up to 100%. So in some cases it will be 100%. In other cases it will be a lower proportion of your council tax. And then there's council tax discount, which is paid at a set rate of 25% off where a person is living by themselves. And there is the Watersure scheme. And again, this is not as comprehensive as it could be. So in order to qualify for this, this being some help with water bills, you need to be getting one of those benefits, and all of those are means tested benefits. Universal credit, pension credit, and housing benefit are all means tested benefits, and you need to be in a position where you have to use a lot of water for medical reasons, and you have to have a water meter or be waiting, as it says there, waiting for one to be installed. So if you're getting a means tested benefit, you can demonstrate you have a need for using lots of water, more than your average person, and you've got a meter or you've asked for one, then you could get some assistance with your water bills as well. And there are other locally administered funds that you could apply to. There's the discretionary housing payment, and as it says there, it is administered by local authorities, and as the name sort of suggests, it is to do with housing. So if you're struggling with rent, you're in rent arrears, or you're struggling with mortgage or in mortgage arrears, I realise many people will be in a position of having paid off their mortgages, but for those for whom that isn't the case, this is an option available to you if you find yourself in straitened financial circumstances specifically to do with housing costs. Then you could contact your local authority and ask them about a discretionary housing payment. And there's another local authority administered fund, which is, as it says there, is the Household Support Fund. And that is broader still in terms of who might be able to apply to the fund. And as it says there, it's for those most in need, define that as you will, government haven't defined that, to help with significantly rising living costs. And again, that's not defined. What constitutes a significant rise in living costs isn't clarified. But if you find yourself, again, in financial circumstances that are very difficult and you need support and you've already explored all the things I've already spoken about, contact your local authority and ask them about the Household Support Fund, because it is there for you. And we ourselves, Parkinson's UK, we also offer a grant. As it says there, it can be up to £1,500, and it can be used to fund electrical items or respite care or specialist equipment or activities. So that is available to you as well. And you can either search on our website for more details about that fund or click on that link when Jane sends around these slides. Public transport savings, bus fares, not in London, but that's not going to apply to anybody here. But bus fares are being limited to £2 because, as you know, those of you who use buses, some bus fares can be really quite high considering the journey, the distance you go. And of course, as soon as you're doing a return journey, it can turn out to be relatively expensive. There is free bus travel available across the country. The start time varies, and it's for those who are state pension age or older or who have a health condition. And again, contact your local authority about that. And then there are 2 rail cards that you could get to get discounts from the cost of travel by rail, assuming the trains are running, of course. And it gives the fees there. £20 for a disabled person's rail card gives you a third off, and £30 for a senior rail card also gives you a third off rail fares. Probably many people here will be aware of the Blue Badge scheme, where if you can demonstrate that you have a greater need for being able to access parking close to wherever your destination is, then you can apply for the Blue Badge. And in some places you can be charged, in other places not, but the maximum that can be charged in England is £10. And there are 2 ways essentially that you can demonstrate your eligibility for the Blue Badge, one of which is to be in receipt of PIP, personal independence payment, and have 8 points or more. And if you're in receipt of PIP, you'll know what that means. And if you're not, then ask the question if you're interested. Or you can, again, demonstrate that your mobility is so compromised that you're unable to walk, or you experience very considerable difficulty whilst walking, which, as we know, many people with Parkinson's will meet that criterion. And blue badges are linked to the person. So if I have a blue badge and Jane is going to give me a lift to the local group meeting, then we can use the blue badge because I'm in the vehicle and I've got the blue badge. However, if Jane was traveling to the meeting by herself, she could not use the blue badge. So the badge goes with the person, and you can use the badge in whatever vehicle, be it a taxi, be it a friend or family's vehicle, be it your own vehicle. But you, the badge holder, have to be in the vehicle and you have to have the card with you. And you could also be eligible for exemption from vehicle tax and I don't know whether this applies in the southwest, but some areas, and certainly in London and some other areas, there are charges, clean air zone charges. So if you're receiving those benefits as listed there, then you could be exempt from those charges if they apply in your area. Some here will hopefully be aware of the Motability Scheme, which essentially enables you to access a brand new car, and you can use your, as it says there, use the one or other of those benefits listed there to pay for the car. In some instances, there is a deposit to pay. In some instances, not. But the payment, the running costs, if you like, are covered by one or other of those benefits. And after the initial 3-year period, if you want to, you can use the scheme again to get another brand new car. And these are just details about the Motability Scheme. So you have to have at least another 12 months running on the relevant benefit in order to be eligible. Again, when these slides are sent out, then if you click on that little blue text when you get to that slide, then you'll find out about what the more specific eligibility criteria are. In some cases, you could get help with the cost of using the internet on your mobile, and that's the website there to find out more. And if you get one of these benefits, pension credit, employment and support allowance, or universal credit, you could switch to a cheaper social tariff and get your broadband at a cheaper rate than otherwise. And Ofcom has further detail about that. So again, once you receive these slides, you can click on these links and find out more detail about these options. And you may find yourself in a position, I've said a couple of times, if you're not receiving the cost of living payments you were expecting, or you didn't receive the haven't received all of the monthly installments of the £400 energy rebate that we were all eligible for, contact us. So there are our details, Parkinson's Helpline and Parkinson's Advisors, one of whom is with us as we speak. You can just search for the helpline and email address that you might want to use to contact us, or you can click on this link once you've received the slides. There are other options in terms of finding out information and support, none of which are Parkinson's specific, unlike ourselves, but they will be useful sources of information. So, for example, the National Energy Action Organisation, they can offer advice on how to make your home more fuel efficient, for example, and bring down bills that way. And the WISE group do the same. Some people will find that they're in the unfortunate but unavoidable, in the context of the cost of living crisis, unavoidable for some, circumstances of being in debt, be that housing related debt, rent or mortgage, or some other kind of debt. Step change can help address debt, and they're a very effective charity. And if you find yourself in that circumstance, do contact them. And then, of course, there's Citizens Advice. They give advice across the board and indeed across the country. They won't give Parkinson's specific advice, but they are very skilled in terms of giving benefit advice. So they are another option available to you. And your local authority, not only are they an actual source of funding in the form of discretionary housing payment or the household support fund, some local authorities will also provide benefits advice and other advice that you could take up via them. So there are a number of options, one of which is Parkinson's specific, some of which are issue specific, National Energy Action, the WISE group, and Step Change, and some of which are generic. But there is more than one option. You might find that you need to contact more than one of those organisations if you have a couple of issues that you want to discuss. So that's what I've tried to cover during this chat. I think I'm may have gone on a little too long, Jane, but nevertheless, I've tried to cover the working age, non-working age benefits, carers costs, cost of living payments, other sources of funding, and other sources of information and advice. And I could say more about a recent cost of living survey that Parkinson's UK did and just give you the highlights of the findings from that survey. But before I go on to that, Jane, perhaps we should see if there are any questions.
I think that's a good idea, if that's okay, Sue, because I think this at the moment. Just one quick thing I'd like to tell you, I don't know whether you probably already know this, Sue, but one of the things you can do with rail cards and stuff is you can use your Tesco vouchers to buy them. So if you have a £10 Tesco voucher, you can convert that to £30 and get a rail card for it. So
I did not know that. It's been
well,
an educational experience.
I have no idea if the other supermarkets do the same sort of things with their cards. Someone else will no doubt let me know. But this certainly is quite a good scheme, and it saves a bit of money. I don't know if anybody's got any other questions they'd like to ask. If they want to put their hand up, they can do that.
Are Parkinson's getting anywhere with getting the government to change their mind and adding Parkinson's to the exempt list for prescription charges?
That is outside of my remit, but I do know that my colleague, that's fine, you're not to know that. I do know that my colleague, who's our head of policy and campaigns, is working with the Prescription Charges Coalition with the objective in mind to achieve that. If we had achieved that by now, believe you me, it would be all over the website. So sadly, not yet. But much energy is still being expended to try and achieve that objective.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sue, what are Parkinson's UK doing to get changes to the current PIP process so that the difficulties that people with Parkinson's face are better understood by the assessors?
It's a good question, Jane. And the issues with PIP are a perennial issue for people with Parkinson's. So just recently, we had a meeting with DWP officials, and that meeting was attended from the Parkinson's UK side by a Parkinson's nurse, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, and a neurologist from either our advice team or our excellence network. And we explained what the particular issues are with Parkinson's and what they mean for an individual. And we've relayed that to the people who make decisions about the design of PIP. And they've asked us to comment on their guidance that they provide to their decision makers and the guidance that's given to the assessors who actually carry out assessments. So we're going to comment on both of those, and we're also going to work with them to provide some training that illustrates the reality of living with Parkinson's and the really particular issues that somebody with Parkinson's is going to encounter that people with other types of condition just aren't. It's also the 10-year anniversary of PIP. PIP was first legislated for and came into effect in 2013. And we hope to be able to talk to ministers about what can be improved in the administration of PIP and the assessment for PIP to coincide with that anniversary. So we're having ongoing conversations both with ministers and with officials, and we are inputting on, as I say, the guidance and training that relates to PIP and those carrying out those assessments.
And yeah, I was going to say there's a question come up there. When is it the right time to apply for PIP?
I am going to defer, if I may, to Karen.
That was a parcel, wasn't it?
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for coming and thanks for inviting me. To start with, to apply for PIP, you need to be below state pension age. Doesn't matter if you're working or not. You can work and still have PIP. That's not a problem. And the best thing to do if you're looking to find out if you're eligible for PIP, would be to check our website or any website for the PIP descriptors, they're called. And this is how the DWP score an application. In order to be eligible for the lower rate of PIP, you need at least 8 points. And if you look at the descriptors, you'll see they have little sentences pertaining to each question which is asked in the application. And next to the little sentence, like, I can prepare a meal unaided, 0 points. I need an aid or equipment, 4 points, etc. I think that was 2 actually. But you need to get to 8 by the end of the daily living activities to get at least the lower rate. If you get to 16 points, and well, assuming that they agree with you, and then you get a higher rate. There's 2 elements to PIP, personal independence payment. There's a mobility component and a daily living, and each of those are scored separately. You can have one without the other. So long as you're an adult, so long as you're not reached state pension age, and so long as you meet the disability criteria, then go ahead and make an application. Contact us, because there's certain things which you need to be mindful of when completing the form, and it's always good to get some advice, and we'd be happy to help you with some advice around that. So for instance, in terms of preparing a meal, not only can you do it, but can you do it in a reasonable length of time? Can you do it safely? Can you do it repeatedly? That sort of thing. So, it's worthwhile just chatting your answers through with a Parkinson's advisor, and we can help you as much as you need to get an application in. It's not the easiest thing to do. It's a bit of a trudge through the form because it's quite comprehensive, but have a look at it. And if you want to discuss it with someone, then just give us a call.
I would strongly advise anybody who's about to make an application to talk to somebody at Parkinson's UK. They have done a lot of these and they can save you a lot of time. So get in touch, I think, through the helpline, isn't it, Karen?
Yeah, make your initial contact through the helpline, and then you'd be passed over to someone who can help you spend a bit more time to go through that.
Yeah, okay, but it is a very long process, and it's not the easiest process to go through, to be honest, but when you get beyond it, it's all right. Yeah. Over to you again, Sue.
As I mentioned earlier, in September and October of last year, we ran an online survey asking people with Parkinson's and people who support those who are living with Parkinson's what their experience of living in the cost of living, their experience of the cost of living crisis was. And so I thought it might be of interest to some, at least, to talk about what the key findings were that we discovered. Martha, if you could move on. These indeed are the key findings. So you can see that over 3/4 of the people with Parkinson's who took part in the survey, they said to us that they anticipated turning on their heating less frequently this winter, specifically to save money on fuel costs. And now I know that everybody here will be well aware that Parkinson's symptoms can be affected by cold. So therefore, there is a much greater need for people with Parkinson's to be in a warm home than your average person. So it's quite alarming that 3/4 of the people who contacted us via that survey said that they expect to be cutting their heating in their homes simply to save money in the context of the cost of living crisis. And perhaps equally alarmingly, 1/4 of the people who responded to that survey said that they were having fewer meals because they needed to save money. And again, everybody here will be well aware that diet is another factor that's very important to managing Parkinson's symptoms. Everybody here will no doubt be aware that bone health is a particular issue for people with Parkinson's. So the need to make sure you have enough vitamin D and calcium is critical, and there are other foods that are more important for a person with Parkinson's than they might be for somebody who hasn't got the condition. So it's incredibly worrying that such a proportion of survey respondents are saying that they're having fewer meals. And then overall, almost 2/3 of the people who contacted us via the survey said they're struggling to cover costs, which is alarming. And one way that people have told us that they are saving money, in addition to turning on their heating less and eating fewer meals, is just not going out as much, either because their symptoms are aggravated by the cutting down on heat or meals, or they simply can't afford the cost of running their own vehicle, or hiring a taxi, or using public transport. And so people are becoming more isolated, and as everyone here will appreciate, that can run the risk of an increased sense of loneliness, which has detrimental impact on mental health. And indeed, 40% of the people who took part in the survey told us that their symptoms are being made worse by their financial situation. And unsurprisingly enough, energy and food bills were the most difficult to manage for those who were struggling with costs. 1/3 of people saying they don't have enough money to manage well. 2/3 almost saying they have enough money to get by, but they're reliant on their savings. And again, approximately 2/3 saying they're struggling to cover costs, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And again, unsurprisingly, none of this will be a surprise, because we're all experiencing it to one degree or another. It's household fuel bills that are most problematic to manage, and indeed food costs escalating as they are mean that food bills as well are one of the most difficult bills to manage. And as I mentioned, a lot of people have told us via the survey that they're socializing less, almost half, and getting on for 3/4 of the survey respondents are telling us that they feel more socially isolated than they did at the start of the year. And of course, it was approximately this time last year that the cost of living began to escalate. So we were asking people to compare their circumstance at the time of the survey, September and October of last year, with the period before the cost of living crisis began. And there are, as I say, 3/4 of the respondents saying that they feel more socially isolated because of the costs of not being so. And the other thing is that we're all well aware of is that not only is loneliness problematic in terms of having a negative impact on mental health, we will all be well aware of the absolute critical importance of being able to access physical activity sessions in order to manage symptoms, and people are not accessing those as much as they would have done otherwise. As it says there, around 1/4 of the people who responded to the survey are engaging less frequently with hobbies, with well-being activities, however they're defined, and physical activity sessions, either because there's a charge for one or more of those, and the people in question can no longer afford that charge, and or they just can't afford to get to where these things are happening. And as it says there, 43% are saying they're traveling less. So that was just the quickest whistle-stop tour of the most striking findings from the survey. And I suspect Jane might ask me now, but what's going to happen with that information? And
that's what I was going to ask you.
So this afternoon, I've been putting the final touches to the report that looks at all of the findings that we've gathered and explores in greater detail the impact that's specific to people for Parkinson's of each of these ways that people are saving money: less heating, less eating, less activity. And we're going to be put in fact, we have already written to the Chancellor and said, this £150 disability cost of living payment, disability specific cost of living payment, isn't enough in and of itself when you consider that the extra costs in the context of the cost of living crisis, the extra costs over and above an average person's increased heating costs, the extra cost a person with Parkinson's has to pay to heat their homes sufficient to manage symptoms effectively is about £1,200 for the year. So we wrote to the Chancellor and said £150 is nowhere near enough, quite apart from the fact that, as we know, in order to get that £150, you have to be in receipt of PIP or DLA or attendance allowance. And as we've already discussed, not everybody who could and should be eligible for those benefits who are living with Parkinson's get them because of the shortcomings of the system. So not only is it the case that not everybody who should get those benefits and therefore could get that £150, £150 is nowhere near enough. So we've written to the Chancellor, and when this fuller report is published, then we will be asking people to write to their MPs to take it up again with the Chancellor and make the point that, yes, provision has been made, all those cost of living payments, but A, they're not enough, and B, not everybody who needs support is actually getting support via those mechanisms.
Thank you. Yes, that sounds good. Well, let's hope you get some results, though. This is always the trouble, isn't it? It can disappear. I guess other charities are doing the same thing, are they?
Other charities are calling on government to make particular changes in response to the cost of living crisis. So, for example, there's a charity called the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and they've brought together a whole group of charities of, I think, around 100 different charities from across the country, and saying to government that the cost of living payments simply aren't enough, but more fundamentally, the benefit system, the rates that benefits are paid at are entirely insufficient for the reality of the cost of living in general, but in particular now when food and fuel prices have escalated to the degree that they have. And you won't be surprised to learn that government respond by saying we've already made this cost of living package available and those who are in greatest need will be supported via that package. And as I said earlier, they're doing a rerun, if you like, of that from April this year. And that's what government points to. But we, as is the nature of trying to influence government when they on something they don't want to be influenced on, it's our role to keep making the point and to say when they point to that support package, it's not enough. And even if it was enough, not everybody who needs support is getting support because the route via which people in need of support is identified doesn't work for people with Parkinson's, i.e. the benefit system doesn't work sufficiently for people with Parkinson's. And so there's a twofold issue. The amounts made available are insufficient. Even if they were sufficient, too many of the people from our community wouldn't be receiving them.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the descriptors on PIP, it's very hard to place yourself on any of the answers very often. Somebody asks you, how do you know when you can apply for PIP? It's really difficult actually to know when you should do or could do. But again, I guess people like Karen can help you on that, so that would be good.
I'd like to thank both Sue and Karen Safe from Parkinson's UK for giving up their time this evening to talk to us, and also thanks to Martha for being my technical support in the background yet again.